What's it like building a seven-figure Airbnb business with a spouse? Well, that's exactly what Michael and Elizabeth Chang have done. There's been good times, there's been bad, but at the end of the day, they are doing this thing. We're going to learn exactly what they're doing, how they're doing it right now here on the Fearless Investor Podcast. Hey, welcome into the Fearless Investor Podcast. You're listening to me, Kyle Stanley. If you are not already subscribed to our podcast, please do. If you're on the YouTube channel and you're not already subscribed, make sure to do that too. Either way, leave a comment or leave a review, no matter which one you're on. We would love to see your feedback. And also just all that engagement just helps us get out to more people, which obviously makes this a better industry. We just want to continue to impact more people. So let's get into it with speaking of being a better industry, Michael and Elizabeth Chang are doing this business the right way. They're doing it in the way of together, like just not only married on a personal side, but they're married in their business. And for that reason, there's a lot of things that go into that. And I asked Michael that. Unfortunately, Elizabeth was under the weather and not able to join us. So we were only able to get Michael's perspective. But really, we got to dive deep into what's it like doing business with someone that you're literally married to. And I think that's a struggle for anyone, but it's also for many of you out there, maybe thinking like, hey, my wife would be great at the accounting side of this, or hey, my husband would be really good at the customer service side and I really want them to do this. This is a really great conversation that we had together to kind of discuss what were the things that really made this a really good marriage in the business, not just in the personal life. So let's get to it right now with Michael Chang. Hey guys, welcome into the Fearless Investor Podcast. We're with Michael Chang today, and we were going to be with Michael and his wife, Elizabeth. Unfortunately, Elizabeth is a little bit under the weather, so we're going to have, that's always a good relationship, right? Just hearing one side of it, right? One-sided communication is the way to a great, clear relationship, right, Michael?
Exactly. I speak for both of us, so it'll be great for us to for me to present the story. But
Yeah.
thanks for having me, Kyle.
Absolutely excited to have you. So, Michael, before we get into this conversation that I'm really looking forward to, I think it's going to be a fun one. What is your craziest, wildest, funniest, whatever you want to fill in for the adjective Airbnb story that you have to share with us?
Sure. I thought about this when we had first started. Both of my we were working, and our first Airbnb was about 30 minutes away. So this is probably like 3 weeks into our Airbnb journey, and we get a call from the cleaner and said, "Hey, do you know your bed's broken?" And I was like, "Oh," we were like, "Oh my gosh, what happened?" We have a turn in it. We had someone coming in at 4 o'clock that day, and we messaged the guests. We're like, "Hey, the bed is broken. Kind of what happened?" And then they're very, very nice. Like, we had a little too much fun last night. We had too much to drink, had a little too much fun. Sorry, we broke your bed. We're happy to pay for it. We're really sorry. We're rushing to airport, so we didn't have a chance to tell you. So we all kind of good laugh about it. We were able to find a store nearby to deliver a new bed frame, and they were kind enough to pay for it. But that was within the first month, so it was kind of funny. But it showed that we could actually. People were nice, and that we could actually, solve unexpected problems. So that was the first part of our journey.
Hey, that's a tame story. I'll take that if that's the craziest thing that's happened to you. So that's good. Awesome. Well, Michael, excited to have you on the show here. And I know your wife is here in spirit, but tell us a little bit about what your business looks like today. How many units? Where are they located? Are they all owned? Are they arbitrage, co-hosted? Give us just that little in-depth look.
Definitely. So we have about 30 Airbnb units total in our portfolio. We have 6 cabins that we own in the Smoky Mountains that my wife and I own. And we have over 20 Airbnb arbitrage units all in Philadelphia. So we started in New York. We expanded. COVID hit. We had to close some of those down. But we continued to expand in Philadelphia and use those arbitrage profits to buy in Tennessee. And we can talk a little bit more about combining the two strategies, and how it worked. But credit to Elizabeth, she was the one that identified both markets, and we worked together hand in hand to build this business where we both have quit our full-time jobs and focused on the business exclusively now.
So That's really interesting. I mean, you said Elizabeth identified those markets. What specifically was she looking for to decide that Philly and Tennessee, especially the Smoky Mountains, was the best place to go?
Yeah, so on Philly, we wanted to stay in the Northeast, just higher ADRs in Northeast generally, right? Just people have, I think just higher, kind of higher disposable income there. And it was somewhere that we could scale within large multifamily properties. And, we just really understood the Northeast kind of, the demand drivers within Philadelphia. And we were comfortable with that. Has sports, education, medicine, a lot of different demand drivers, which we really, really liked. And Smokies, I wish she was here to talk about it, but she did a lot of research. Shout out to Avery Carl and the short-term shop there. Learned a lot from them. This is 2017,
Nice.
so this is when Avery was like two people, and so we would like work directly with Avery and her team. Really educated us on the market, and just a lesson learned to listen to your spouse, because she wanted to buy in 2017. Collectively she was ready, collectively we weren't ready, and I'd be a lot closer to retirement if I had listened to her and we bought in 2017, because there's a lot of appreciation between 17 and 20, and then 20 and 23. So we missed that first leg. At least we got the second leg.
So am I understanding that you started with arbitrage and then started owning?
Yeah, we started arbitrage. So we started with arbitrage in New York. So just quick story. Her dad had they have a house here in New York, or a 3-unit house here in New York. One of the tenants moved out, and we had read about Airbnb, and we're like, oh, why don't we just give it a shot? It's not a big investment. We're both still working, and after a few months, we did it. We kind of learned it. We're like, wow, this cash flow is great. And then she quit her job, and then we started scaling the business.
That's awesome. So what was it? You said she was ready to buy in 2017, but it sounds like you weren't quite ready. What did that ultimate decision kind of look like? Was there some butting of heads, or was it, did she realize even buying in 2017 may have been a risk?
I think we both weren't. We weren't savvy. We weren't savvy real estate investors by any means. I think we understood investing conceptually. I come from a finance background, but we hadn't bought anything ever. Like, we bought our first property in 2018, actually. So we hadn't bought anything. It was far away in Tennessee. We live in New York. And we're going to remember, this is 2017. So there a lot of the software tools, a lot of things that exist now in 2023 did not exist in 2017. The cameras, the locks, all this stuff, right? So there was a lot of reticence on my part. Obviously, in hindsight, I was, incorrect. But I think it was more of like, she had done the work to understand the market, and I hadn't. And we just, we should have spent more time to understand that, and maybe just bought something smaller just to kind of get our feet in the market. But things happen for a reason. So, I'm glad we're there now.
You also mentioned that you had full-time jobs when you started this. What were those jobs, and what eventually led to you guys now doing this full-time?
So I was an investment banker. So I went to, got my MBA from Cornell, kind of thinking back over there. And then, went to work on Wall Street. So I spent 10 years as an M&A banker in New York at Citigroup and Bank of America Merrill Lynch. So doing really big, chunky public market deals. I really understood that part of finance. My wife worked in luxury fashion. She worked at Tiffany's and worked at Kate Spade in their international kind of expansion department. So we came with it with different skill sets. And I think luckily been able to kind of work well together to figure out what we each were good at and not good at, and being able to build this business together. That this is now kind of both of our full-time jobs, and being able to scale it enough where we can live and support us, our family. We have a young daughter as well, living in a fairly high-cost area here in New York City.
Nice. I think Andy from The Office went to Cornell too, didn't he?
It is. It's a big school. Big school.
There you go. So what exactly though, where was that point where you were like, okay, we are ready to do this full time. We're ready to leave both of our jobs. And what was all that led into that decision too?
Yeah, I wish Liz was here, because she kind of left first. She'd always wanted to do something on the real estate side. She was she had a real estate license kind of earlier on in her career, didn't really use it, was just just kind of in the luxury fashion business. And I think as I've been understand the industry, it's kind of glamorous, but not very well. It's not a very well compensated industry. It's a lot of work. And I think she wanted to be able to express her creativity in a different way, and she just wasn't able to do that in her job. So I think a big part of it was, how do I find something that can express my creativity and also combine that with real estate? And somehow Airbnb really does kind of combine those two facets together, unlike a lot of different things. So I think she was naturally just gravitated towards that. And then once we had a few units and I saw the numbers, and I was like, okay. And with my finance background, I'm like, all right, well, this really works. And like, this is scalable. So let's really do it. And, she's like, well, she raised her hand and said, hey, I can do this full time and, really, really grow this. And it was the right decision.
So what were those numbers that you had to see? Like, maybe tell me about one of the deals that you were doing at that time and you saw those numbers. What were those numbers that were coming from some of the deals that you were like, wow, I really can leave my, that's a big time job being in investment banking. So what did those numbers look like?
Yeah. Look, I mean, the first deal, or the first deal was, her dad's apartment, right? So, or her dad's building. So it was kind of, it's like a friends and family kind of deal. But the first, third party deal that we did, I mean, the rent was $2,400 a month. It was a 3-bedroom apartment, 30 minutes outside of Manhattan by the subway. And first few months, I mean, it was doing like 10K a month in revenue.
Wow.
20, it's like 4 times rent. So it was like, you're clipping $6,000 per property. And yeah, investment banking is great, but you're like, okay, well, that's one property, like times 10, like, okay, that's real, times 50, like that's really real. Again, back in 17, you didn't really have the infrastructure, but now you definitely do. The software tools are just so much better now. But after seeing that, and it was like, okay, well, it's like a $8,000 investment up front, so that you get back basically the first 3 months. And you didn't need a finance degree to figure that. You didn't need a finance degree to figure that out.
Yeah.
It was pretty compelling. And New York's a great look. Obviously, New York was a great market before the new rules came down. But that's what attracted us to the Northeast as well, is because just much higher ADRs or daily rates than other parts of the country, and more scalable. But with those numbers, we were able to, once we scaled a few units, we were able to replace our income. My income, I've been doing this for a while as well. So I was at a point in my career where I wanted to do something different, and so I didn't need to replace everything. But we had enough savings that we could take a risk, and luckily we've had some success.
Awesome. So I want to get into business with your wife. And by the way, we've got the chat going in the 6-figure formula group. A couple of people in here also doing business with their spouse. I see Tashiana says that she's doing that with her husband. So, I think when we look at your business, excuse me, when we look at your business, we see a lot of different factors, right? You live in New York, you're starting in New York, but now you're eventually expanding to Tennessee, you're expanding to Philadelphia. You're doing, so essentially a large part of your business you're doing remotely. You still have your full-time job. Your wife has maybe just quit her job, but you're probably, I'm guessing, getting into the groove of like, this is what life looks like running a business with my wife. Can you kind of talk about maybe some of those struggles or internal conversations or issues that you may have been having by working with the person that you are raising kids with and sleeping next to every single night?
Yeah, so it's a great thing that she's not feeling well. So you'll just get, you hear my side of the story. So look, it's not easy, especially when you start a business, especially when you go through COVID, especially, which I'll touch on briefly. But look, I think a couple of key principles I think we had to learn in the beginning, and it obviously took time, right? Like, one is just separating like the personal from the professional, right? Like, there's a work part, and then there is like the personal part. And obviously that line shifts and is hazy, but just knowing that there is a line there that should be respected, I think that was like a good first step, right? It was like, okay, obviously we're going to disagree on work, but let's not let it bleed into the home life. And I think we've done we've gotten better and better at it over the last 5-6 years. That's number one. I think second one was just, in the beginning, definitely, and I'm glad I'm able to tell the story that she's not here right now. She wanted to get like this super fancy shampoo for the first units, and I was like, they're
Right.
pretty expensive. I'm not sure of the ROI here. And then I remember that being a fairly long conversation. But that was something where we both had to kind of figure out guest experience versus the financials, right? And sometimes I was right, sometimes she was right, but just kind of working out that balance there on what we wanted to do. So that was, I remember that was one of the first kind of bigger disagreements we had that we eventually resolved. And then lastly, it's just how do you divide and conquer, right?
Yeah.
And eventually kind of pulling yourself out of the business, right? What I mean by that, as we scaled and we have VAs and processes, really being like, okay, look, we really got to get out of this, right? Because if we want to grow, we want to do other things in our lives, and we have to kind of get out of this. And how do we actually do that together as a team, right? And people want to. There are things that people get attached to that they don't want to give up, but also just like, okay, we're business people, right? We're not customer service agents. We're not this, that, and the other. We're not a functional person within the business. We need to get out of it, get onto that 30,000 foot level so we can continue to grow the business and scale it to a point that, that endpoint that we want. And we're just not going to be able to do that if we're always working in the business. So just kind of 3 lessons that, and there are many more, but those are just kind of 3 things that come to mind. But I'm glad I'm able to tell a second one without her being here.
Yeah.
She'd probably elbow me in the side right now if she was here right now.
Well, and that's what I wanted to actually ask a follow-up question to. It sounds like that might have been the starting point to potentially creating some boundaries or lanes that you're staying in versus what she's doing. Was there at some point where you're like having to have that come to Jesus talk of like, hey, we're having too many like back and forth about this. Let's just say this is yours and this is mine. Or did you have any sort of those kind of conversations?
We definitely did. We had a lot of those, and some were easy, right? So I'm like, oh, the finance stuff I'll take care of. Some of this, the design stuff I'll take care of, right? Just because that's what we're naturally better at. Each kind of naturally better at. But there are things that we both were either bad at or good at that we both had to kind of continue to work together. And those are the harder ones, right? Like which market to go into. I think we both had kind of strong opinions on that. Kind of how fast to grow, how to grow. Just conversations on that. But one thing that we're both bad at was handling the customer service stuff. We both were doing it, and we both had different philosophies on how to handle customer service. I think anyone here that has answered guest questions and complaints will attest to there's a different philosophy on that, and we both butted heads a lot on that, and for years until I think we figured out like we are both really terrible customer service agents, and we need to hire someone that's good, that's better than us, that has the right mentality, that can be in front of a computer. So that's when we started hiring outside help. First, obviously we had the cleaners, but then really handling the customer service stuff. And then after we were able to train the person, and we both were able to kind of get out of it, and then that person was able to handle it. So we both eventually were able to extricate ourselves out of it. So that's something that it was a long years and years of not agreeing, not seeing eye to eye. But we solved it by both getting out and getting someone else into that role.
So, that's easy. You're both bad at it, right? Which means you both probably want to get that off your plate. What's something that maybe you both are good at that you haven't wanted to get off your plate, that whether it's been resolved or still to this day is something that you kind of struggle over getting to see eye to eye on?
It's a great question. I think, my first instinct to answer that is how to grow the business. I think we both have, whether it's arbitrage, co-hosting is not something that we've done that for a few friends in Manhattan that had, nice apartments that are fully furnished. So those are kind of easy conversations, but that's not something that we've historically focused on. Arbitrage and buying, kind of that balance, where, I think we both still have kind of strong opinion. We both have strong opinions on that, on how best to do that, and timing, sequence, how much. So I think that's just an ongoing conversation that we've had over the last 5-6 years. I don't know if that answers your question or not,
No,
but
it
that's,
does. So
yeah.
I guess, knowing that, right? Like just the decision of, hey, do we go into co-hosting? When's the right time? Like, how is it that both of you are coming to the table and saying, hey, we might not be seeing eye to eye, but here's how we're going to resolve this, or here's how we're going to, I guess what I'm looking at is just for those out there that are listening to this right now and they're thinking, man, I'm doing this with a spouse, or I really want to get a spouse on board to do this. And I just know that we're going to butt heads, or we continue to butt heads on this, but I don't know how to get past that to
Yeah.
make this a really good business relationship. You see what I'm getting at here?
Yeah, I do. So just kind of what's the dispute resolution mechanism,
Yeah.
right? So again, not that we're probably not doing it right, but the way that I think we've landed on, or just these past few years, is who has I think we both ask ourselves, like, okay, we both have a viewpoint here, like how strongly do you, I think it's like, how strongly do you feel about this, right? And then we kind of like a 1 to 10, like how strongly do you feel about this? Is it 10? Is it a 5? Is it 3? And then like, so it's like, strong views, either weakly held, or strongly held. And then I think that kind of starts a conversation, right? It's okay, well, we both see it this way, but like how strong do you actually think about it? Because a lot of times you'll be like not that strong, like I think, but not that. And another person will be like, no, I actually feel really strongly about this because of X, Y, and Z. It's like, okay, well, look, I mean, I respect your, obviously I respect you. We've done this business together. We're both equal partners in this. And that's been a nice, easy, and I think that in our experience has resolved like 80-90% of the issues. Is just asking a simple question, is like, oh, how strong do you feel about it, and then why, right? Because there's a very few times where it's both like, I feel both really, really strongly about something, and then that is just a longer kind of resolution process, if at all. But I think most things, just like, I feel like a 3, I feel like a 7. Okay, well, why do you feel a 7? Why do you feel a 3? Okay, I get it. Well, maybe we'll play around the edges there, or another way to do it is just cut it, like wait 24 hours, wait till the next day, just like noodle on it, and then that once you hear those other side, you have that motion's out of it, you have time to think about it, without kind of being the heated moment, right? And I think that's helpful as well.
That's really good. I mean, it sounds like what you're just saying is you're seeking to understand each other and just allowing for maybe some cool off times to be able to see, like, do I really feel as strongly about this as I think I do?
Exactly. And
So
yeah, just like magnitude, I think just magnitude of decisions, right? It's like not just do I feel X or Y, right? It's like also like how strong, like how, like what shade of red is that?
yeah,
Is that convincing, right? Because sometimes you think about it, you're like, I don't feel that strong. You'll actually, if you're honest with yourself too, you're like, I don't feel so strongly about that. And if it's not about who's right or who's wrong, but ultimately we have a child and a family, it's like what actually makes money in the best risk adjusted way, right? That's all. I think that's also important too. Just like, what is the end goal? Like, what are we trying to solve for, right? Is it we're
yeah.
trying to solve for like who's right or wrong, or it's like we're trying to solve for like how do we make money, right? And then how do we grow the business? How do we do it in a smart way? I think having that alignment helps a lot, and it takes time.
Well, I also like what you did there too, with just like, hey, you have an opinion about this, but how strong is that opinion? Scale of 1 to 10, right? Like, because I can have an opinion, and if my opinion on that is a 2 out of 10 and yours is an 8 out of 10, but we don't define that, then we might feel like we're butting heads, when at the end of the day, the person who's a 2 out of 10 could easily just step aside, because that person who feels an 8 out of 10, it's the risk and reward of of making Elizabeth mad because she's 8 out of 10 on that. That's good to get out there in the open. I like that.
Exactly. And it also iterates too, right? It's like, okay, maybe you're wrong. You felt 8 out of 10, but that was the wrong decision. Then, okay,
Sure.
well, next time it's like, hey, that wasn't really right. So it's a constant like learning process as well. You
Hmm.
just kind of iterate.
Yeah. So it sounds like Elizabeth was pretty on board right away to do this with you. Is that right? Was it her idea originally?
That's her idea.
Okay. And what did it take for you to get on board? And I'm not talking about the numbers, because it sounded like, the numbers, what you said earlier, was what made you realize, hey, maybe I could eventually leave my full-time job. But what was it that she said in the beginning that made you say like, yes, I will do this with you, right? Not just I will support you and watch you from afar, but I will actually do this with you.
Yeah, I mean that was a pretty easy one. I've always had this entrepreneurial streak to me as well. So wanting to start wanting to start a business, wouldn't take a lot to convince me to do that if I thought it was a good idea. So, but I think being able the real estate aspect of it and being able to use this to build, to acquire real estate was very compelling to me. I just looked at that time was this long-term rentals, right? I was like, this is not interesting. Like, I don't like, why am I doing all this just to bet on appreciation? And if you live in New York City, it's like, you're actually negative cash flow every single month. And you're just betting on appreciation. And I was like, this isn't compelling at all. Why would I want to do this? And then once we saw kind of what Airbnb could do, then that was a pretty easy decision to
Awesome.
to try. It's a $10,000 initial investment. It just wasn't a lot. It wasn't a lot of money.
Yeah, no, and that's not. And so it sounds like you kind of just, as a person, in terms of the way that your mind works, it already fit with your model. Let's say someone's listening right now and saying, hey, my wife or my husband or my significant other, I really want them to do this because I think they'd be really good at it, but they're just not on board. What do you say to someone like that?
Well, look, I think I'd say a few things. Like, one, you don't want to force it, right? If someone's just genuinely not ready, doesn't have it, just very conservative. I think like you don't want to sign yourself up to something by forcing someone into a business. I don't think a great way to. It's not good for the relationship health. But if a person is open, I think a big thing is just go and find someone else that's done this before successfully, right? Because they probably aren't comfortable because you're. I think a natural response to a spouse when you do something is like, like, really, like, you want to do all these other things before, you didn't really do it. Like, why take this big risk now? So I think it's just like not convincing them, excuse me, educating them on why Airbnb or whatever you want to do is a good use of time and money, right? Finding someone that's done it before that can like give them that experience point of view, laying out, okay, well, this is what I want to do. This is how much it costs. This is what we think we can make. Like, just actually having a plan. Because like a lot of people just like, I want to do this. Oh, because Kyle, I watched Kyle, and Kyle said this is going to make us a lot of money. So like, this is why we should do it. Or Mike said, it's like, oh, that's not really good enough, right? It's actually like lay it out and how it actually looks. So I think if you go through that decision process, I think your partner will just take it a lot more seriously. And I think partners like intuitively want to support each other, right? I mean, that's why you're together in a relationship. You want to, you want to do together, and you want to support each other. So, having a family, and I think when my wife and I started in this beginning, we're like, oh, this actually be a good way for us to, just get more reps in as we want to start a family. Because like, having kids, having a kid now, it's not dissimilar to running a business. It's a lot of coordination and like negotiation. Like, you're building something together. So it's kind of a good practice. So, if that's another way you can convince your significant other, it's like, hey, let's work out the kinks now. Like, let's get a dog before we have a kid, right? Just kind of that same strategy.
Well, I like what you said there. And I think the key word was support, right? Like, I think a lot of people, they start a business, and, I used to be in a multi-level marketing company. And, one of the biggest things we ever heard was like, I just want my husband or I want my wife to be on board. And especially in any sort of business, right? It's not that they need to be doing it with you. You just need their support, right? Like, and what is the saying? A woman who supports a man makes the man feel like he can take on the world, right? Like, it's not them doing it with you that has to happen. It's just that support. And I think that's the key word that I liked what you said there. So, Mike, what's next for this business and for you and your wife? And you've already accomplished a ton. You own some properties. It sounds like, you both quit your jobs. What's next for your STR business?
We want to continue to grow it. We want to continue to grow it in a smart way. Like, you see a lot of people say, I have, 100 units, 200 units, 300 units. I think for us, it's never been the goal. And I think, having what that goal in mind before you start is also important. So you don't keep moving the goalposts as you continue to as you launch your business. So for us, it's we're going to take 5 to 15, 5 to 15 arbitrage units a year, kind of where we're comfortable in Philadelphia, or where we really know the area, and we'll take those arbitrage profits and buy more properties in the Smokies or another market that we've identified. So we're not. I think we're honest with ourselves. Like we've been lucky to find something that works, so we're just going to keep doubling down on what we know works. So we'll just keep growing the arbitrage business, keep buying more property. We really believe that's the path of long-term wealth, and then also growing our social media presence, right? So I think people are curious about the story, about how they can work together as a husband and wife or as a couple to build an Airbnb business, to achieve that financial freedom, time freedom, location freedom. I think that's, especially now, this time where we are in the economy, a lot of uncertainty. People are hungry for real information. So it's been really good to kind of tell people what we've done in the last 5-6 years, so that people can see a true example of. I'm 40, I'm going to turn 43 and not too long from now. I'm 43. My wife's in her 30s. We have kids. We have a kid. We have a family. So we're not just like a 20-year-old that's like, hey, look at my Ferrari. We're like, hey, we're real people, and this is a real path to building a sustainable business for yourself to support your family, support your lifestyle. Especially if you just don't want to work in your 9 to 5, no matter what it is, right? Like I was an investment banker, I was making really good money, but fundamentally it wasn't set. It didn't
Right.
achieve the goals that I wanted. And this is just a much better fit.
So just one last question there. You guys started in 2017, which really I would say is even ahead of the curve. I think really things started getting popular in right around 19. And so you had those 2 years probably where you can compare it to today. What does the market look like today compared to where you started? And what are the adjustments that you and your wife are talking about making or implementing to adjust to the market?
Well, look, the game has definitely leveled up since then. 2017, 18, 19, you could put anything on Airbnb and make you money. Now you really need to understand the market. You really need to understand the property. You really need to operate as a professional. Like there's a lot more competition out there, but there are few professional hosts. If you can really dial in your game, right? Whether so finding the market, finding the right property, setting it up properly, operating it well. Those are the things that's going to make you a successful Airbnb investor. Now just putting anything up on Airbnb and expecting to make money, that's a recipe for not making money, and not having a good relationship with your spouse. If that's something that you're trying to work on together. But I think that's where the game is changing. And for us, the adjustments are investing more into property, right? Just it needs to be. You need more differentiators now, just because there's just so much more supply, and really dialing in your pricing. Also, like really, really important. Want to leave money on the table, and you don't want to price too high where you're not getting booked. So it's a harder journey right now, but the rewards are still there if you can figure it out.
Awesome. Mike, thanks so much for joining us on the Fearless Investor podcast and for helping our audience to conquer the world of short-term rentals. We're going to keep it now in the 6FF community for the live Q&A. Thanks so much, Mike. All right, guys, if you are not part of the six-figure formula, you need to make sure to go check that out so you can be in the room after our podcast with guests like Michael Chang. fearlesskyle.com/6FF to join. And wink, wink, if you go and explore that page even a little bit more, you might find there's a free 3-day trial. Just throwing that out there. So anyway, that's going to do it now for the Fearless Investor podcast. We're helping you to conquer the world of short-term rentals. We'll see you next time.